Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Beyond Likely Cause, Achieving Clarity and Confidence in Cyber Incident Response. My name is Sophie Bovey, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Binalyze, and I'll be your host. We're very excited to have two experts with us today. First, Dr. Kall Loper, who has over 25 years of experience researching cyber threats and delivering incident response and digital forensic services, and today leads BDO's data breach review offering. Kall's experience includes hundreds of digital forensics investigations and cyber incident response, including some of the largest threat campaigns to date. And we've also got our very own Robert O'Leary, sorry, Robert, our Senior Solutions Architect here at Binalyze. Robert also brings more than 25 years of experience in digital evidence and cyber investigations, from founding one of the first statewide tech crime units in the US to leading practices at major forensic software firms. Together, they'll be discussing one of the most common challenges in incident response. That is the difference between likely cause and root cause, and why stopping short leaves organizations exposed. Most importantly, they'll show you how what has traditionally been a very complex specialist process can now be approached with greater speed, clarity, and confidence. Before I hand it over to them, just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the session, please do feel free to pop them in the Q&A box in the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. We have saved a little bit of time at the end to address audience questions. Also, the session is being recorded and we will be sharing a replay with you afterwards. And finally, slides will also be shared. So with that, without further ado, over to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Sophie. We wanted to start this off, just give you a preview of what the conversation is going to be about. And the topic, I think, is more there to intrigue than it is to immediately lay it out and everything we're going to say. We're looking at root cause analysis, the role it plays in an incident and how we get there. To do that, ultimately the goal is we want to move into a world with more automation and AI-enabled tools. Everybody says we've got to do that, but the details on how to go about it are short. This is a step to creating a strategic methodology with defined roles to pursue incidents without making it extremely prescriptive and automating the people instead of the process. So all of that is with a goal that serves the business, which is what we're here for. To do that, we wanted to lay out some different ways people look at root cause. We talk about root cause, we have for years and years, and I've participated in a number of root cause analysis assessments, or RCAs. A lot of the time, what we're talking about in the technical side is what's the original cause, what was the precipitating incident, who was patient zero, what happened there, and then how did it spread. And that gives us the idea that we can define an incident, move through all the details of it, and produce a report that is informative and useful. Where we've found ourselves in hundreds of incidents now is that we often have incomplete information or insufficient time, or for some reason, the business necessity of moving forward, the timing on that, cyber insurance controls, any number of factors bring us to what we call, in my practices, sufficient cause. And that is, can we take the observables of the incident and explain how each of them occurred and what tools or what exploits or vulnerabilities enabled them? In most of the time, we're dealing with sufficient cause. Root cause gets into all kinds of higher level issues like technology debt and ways the systems have to be configured, or legacy systems being online years after their end of life. And then finally, we get to the worst case, the thing that we sometimes say is sufficient, but we get to this point where we say this is a likely cause, in that we don't want to devote any more resources to it, or the client doesn't want to devote more resources to it. The law firm is okay with what we found so far and seems to think that we've got a pretty decent definition of what happened. Sometimes we're forced into that by the sheer lack of data, the destruction caused by the attacker. But in many cases, it's a business decision about time and resources that puts us there. So keeping in mind that there are many different kinds of root cause, And I'm not saying any of these are what our intention to go for. Obviously, we want to investigate things to the fullest extent possible, include the most expansive set of data, but we need a method that can get us to a goal. And these different parts of the goal can be useful in defining the problem and moving on to next steps. Pardon me. Incidents have often a single point or a unique cause, that initial breach, but in many cases that can be hard to find. We could be looking at access provided by an initial access broker, something that gives the adversary access to the systems, and that original event may have happened months ago, or it may be part of a different event where someone came up with that from a previous breach and those holes haven't been remediated and they're able to go right back in, or maybe they purchase that access on the secondary market from the attacker. Match this up with the different versions of root cause that I've come up with, and you can kind of see an argument forming about why so much incident response work ends in a way that's not sufficient to prevent it again. And that's really our goal, is to get a deep enough picture that we can prevent the next round of attack. Sometimes we get to the point where we just want to file a report, especially internally. I've worked on a number of internal teams, and closing an incident can be very important. The faster, the better. The metrics are there to support it. So we find a likely cause or a sufficient cause and put a tombstone on that incident, finalize the report. And if it's not written in a way that it can be useful to the business, it tends to just get ignored. It's like, oh yes, okay, we understand that. I'm sure somebody's going to do something about it, and we can move along to getting back on track to business, or getting business critical systems going again.
Hey, Kall, to add to that, and I'm sure that you've experienced it, I know that we've seen it many times, to compound those challenges to root cause analysis, it's often when you have multiple people working on individual images or data sets on a single event, and trying to combine all of that, collaborate their findings when they're in isolated environments or isolated investigations. So the ability to find root causes is enhanced, one, through automation, but also through that collaborative capability and looking at all of the assets involved in a single view.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And that is a chief argument that we're going to build up to in terms of automation and AI analysis through various tools that we're going to be seeing popping up and strengthening in the years to come. So very important. Now, as we pivot into automated systems, it requires a little bit more planning, or maybe just a different approach to thinking about it. Instead of what tools do we have, what data do we have, what skills do we have, and let's do our best, which, frankly, defines a lot of what's going on in incident response and investigation these days. It's what can the talent of the team produce with the resources they have. We can take an overview of it, because from what Bob was saying, the more data that we draw into it, the more available it is. And frankly, the more automated or enhanced decision-making that we can make about what to look at, the more we can focus our teams on the actual problem, which is where the human investigators and analysts and, the team can direct their talent to. It's a more interesting problem for them rather than just routine processes. And let's talk about just an overview of what we want to achieve as opposed to what we think we're capable of achieving. We want to identify the root cause. We want that to feed into a remediation of the vulnerability or exploit used. So not just what systems are vulnerable, because if anybody's, in an enterprise of any size, if all your systems are patched to full, good for you. Really well done. We see that last 20, 10, 5% of the systems that tend to stay on that report being some of the troublemakers, and some of them just can't go away for business reasons. We get it. But full identification of those and emphasizing those systems that have been exploited in the past and shouldn't be again, or even the types of problems that pop up, how can we integrate that into a threat intelligence program or platform so that we can be alerted when those new vulnerabilities appear? That can be an important part of an overall methodology. And this is one that feeds in the most important kind of intelligence, which is that which is achieved in your environment. That informs probably the most powerful weapon that we can bring to it, which is an ongoing hunt for not just this attacker, but any attacker that may be using these indicators or these exploits. An ongoing hunt capability that is distinct from your alerting tool can be of tremendous value. A lot of times we have to bring in separate projects for that, or bring in outside groups to do pen testing, or to challenge whatever our alerting or our managed detection and response vendors are doing with a new scenario or with new indicators. Having a separate tool to do that can still be integrated can be useful. And we want this all to be tied together. Now, this is ambitious. We're talking about a total security program, but ultimately, the RCA methodology will feed into a total security view of the enterprise, and that's where we start really getting into some useful features.
And this is where it's important as well to practice these techniques and practice these root cause analysis investigations, much like you would do in a real event, because in those practice sessions is exactly where you're going to start to see the shortcomings or the details that may not have been considered in a simple tabletop exercise or a checklist of tasks. So you need to be able to implement those and practice them frequently with your whole team to know exactly who's doing what, when, and compiling the results to improve the performance.
That is a fantastic point. It leads me into, I think it's worth talking about a little departure. Some war games, some capture the flag exercises, some tabletop exercises take on this very technical character. But if you think about the benefit of a hunt-based exercise, something that would take maybe the product of a hunt and bring it into, say, what would the executive team do about it? What systems would be impacted? And if any of you have participated in a business continuity exercise or a disaster recovery exercise where it tends to be ticking through the systems and confirming configurations before you go into that, that can be an incredibly important technique to getting the enterprise safe and preventing these kinds of issues. So it's not just a tabletop exercise where we get through it and we, play it like it's a tabletop game or something, but turn it into a more useful exercise that digs in with some actual data on your environment.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I've argued against for years, I'm going to talk about probably the better use of it. I've never liked the idea of having well-defined playbooks because you have to know what the event is before you know which playbook to pick up and run with. So here's where the really strong argument for that type of prescriptive playbook comes in, but let's turn it into something actually useful. There are many different kinds of attacks that we can recognize here, and we can see that some of our tools are really designed toward that. Our alerting schemes, our managed detection and response schemes, our endpoint detection and response tools, these can be really good for finding malicious software, for finding intrusions, but probably not very good for insider threat. So can your hunt capabilities and can your investigation capabilities encompass the full threat? If somebody gets in and you're looking for the true root cause and your threat intelligence team identifies that some of your credentials were purportedly for sale on the dark web, do you have a way to go in and investigate people who might have those accesses to sell or have access to identities that can be exploited? And think about that in terms of providing a whole threat defense, the whole environment of threat, not just your attack surface, but everything that could be going on in your enterprise right now to enable that attack. And a methodology that can include that is probably more useful. We've got a way to bring the people in now. I've been talking about automation and systems and AI and the way those tools can really bring a lot of data up to the surface. But where AI tends to fall down is at making actual decisions. I've seen a lot of tools that will say these three things could be interesting. And an analyst will automatically go right to them and say, oh, number two is, number one is, it's almost absurd. Why would you say that? Number three is maybe, but it's going to take a lot of extra work. But number two, that's where it makes sense. Think about that. Think about that magnifying and going to a number of places where right now we use analysts or that entry-level line, first-line person that comes in and we say, do all these repetitive tasks, gather up all this data, hope that you've picked the right systems to identify because your attention isn't infinite, and then see if you can find something useful, as opposed to a defined method with the role in it that says to your entry-level analyst, understand what wrong looks like and how to investigate it, and then let the tool start pointing out things or patterns or trends that might indicate something is wrong, and spend your time usefully. It's also probably a lot more enjoyable than plowing through 1,000 probably useless alerts coming in from the SIM and letting your line level people or your entry level people just have to wade through that in their environment. So if you look at that role of the analyst and how can we enhance it with the tools, it goes up to investigators. And by defining the elements of root cause a little bit differently, we see the role of an investigator, somebody to pull into those types of attacks that may not be straight in line with our security tooling like the analysts are looking at. The analyst can escalate their finding of likely or sufficient cause to the investigator for more analysis. Or you just build in a simple role like a manager or a team lead that can go through, look at those conclusions and determine which ones actually make sense to the business or which ones should be escalated as business problems. Very simple path here. We're not talking about defining these roles by titles, although your mind may immediately go there. I'd recommend, if you're going to build a flexible methodology that can grow, start it out with the function and then fill it with the job title or the people and the skills they bring, and use that to refine your plan. But initially, right off the bat, you should just be looking at a system that you can replicate and that interacts with the tools well. So traditional IR triage, this is something we've done hundreds of times in different incidents. You want your IR team to go out there and gather up data. And what that usually looks like is bringing in a vendor or bringing in a consulting company, having the IR team that you bring in interact with the security team. If you have a resident IR team, that's great, very helpful. Then you use those resources to surge them. But the first 48 hours, and this is something I've told many clients on all the incidents I've had to get in there with the CISO and the upper executive team and calm them down and say, look, the first 48 hours, we want to call it a triage period, because we're going to be gathering data and analyzing it as best we can, as fast as we can, but we're not probably going to be able to come up with immediate conclusions. We'll be trying to, and we have success stories with that, but those steps take time. So you deploy tools, you collect images, you deploy tools, and if you're lucky, you've got a good artifact tool that can go out and get them. You analyze the artifacts and start to come to conclusions, build theories on what was going on and which type of incident you're getting into. In some cases, we're still out there collecting disk images as our primary investigation technique. Often, if the environment's virtualized, it can be done quickly, but it still takes time to upload all that data, run the tool on all that data, come to conclusions, and start turning out useful information as the early incident clock keeps ticking. And on other incidents or other types of incident, we need to do that. Importantly, especially if you've got an insider threat and you're going to take action legally, which is really one of the few venues. You can have an HR action, you can have a legal action. You want to support that with data, and you want to be ready to go to court and make it defensible. But just like I said on that previous slide, if you don't know what type of incident you're looking at from the beginning, and you deploy an overly specific method, or you have a tool set that only handles one of those, you can find yourself at a disadvantage. Right? So we're building toward an argument saying more information is better if you can process it in an automated fashion or make decisions based on it, and conserve those resources that you need, the ones that are needlessly consumed in these repetitive tasks, and direct them toward actually getting something done. Quick example there, this is not an exhaustive list, but for those of you who've been through incidents or you've worked with people who are doing incidents, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of artifacts you're out there looking for. And if you're extracting these either with individually good tools, but ones that don't pull all this information together, you'll probably find yourself in a little bit of a disadvantage in getting the incident closed quickly. There is a lot to do, and it's not necessary on every task. And all of these that you can automate will get done for every task without causing a delay. And that is a huge advantage, because you can go back and explore other theories that got you there and try and find the cause of the incident. Maybe upgrade from a likely cause to a sufficient cause when you find that an employee's been logging onto the dark web and potentially logging into forums where they can sell their credentials. Just one example. So I've been building to this point, and I promise I'm going to let Bob talk at some point here, but we got on a roll. Automated collection and triage tools, like I was just describing, can save you a lot of time, take the repetitive tasks off your people, bring them into a common analysis framework, and hopefully you're seeing this start to build into something that can actually be useful without a lot of upfront architecture, without a lot of, we're going to spend 2 years designing a system that'll have obsolete components by the time we get to roll it out. We're talking about being flexible in the way you deploy people on these problems, flexible and strategic in the way you develop your tool set and put it into automated systems, or find a tool that can run those automations themselves. That can be a tremendous advantage, right? And deploying the right judgment into that. Let's see. So what I wanted to do is a quick comparison here. And this is actually a slide that Bob created a couple of years ago for a presentation that we did. We've updated it since then, but back then we were talking about days of a standard technique, bringing it down to a very short period of time, and it's gotten even shorter now as tools have developed. If you would direct your attention to the top where we have traditional cyber incident workflows, you should recognize this. It's based on the NIST descriptions. It's got a little bit extra built into it, but a lot of times, we go through, we get alerts, we validate the alerts, we escalate the alerts, we go in and start the investigation. Those get kicked up. We decide to dig a little deeper. We go through a collection and triage phase. We start to analyze and investigate. We contain if it's appropriate. And then we start in this cycle. For those of you familiar with the NIST model, it's a little bit of a loop there. And it just keeps, we turn the crank on that and turn the crank on it until there's no data left, right? But it's a defined process that we roll through. It is a practice defined 10, 15 years ago, and it's served us well. But I'm thinking maybe we can do it a little better with modern tools. And when we get to that final stage, that post-incident activity, that's where we start to get into what was the cause, what level of quality do we have on that cause, and how did we get there? Can we replicate it? So compare that to a tool that is expansive broadly in the enterprise. It's deployed everywhere. It's running its automation collection of those. It's running its whether it's a rule-based judgment or an AI-based judgment, it's doing the same thing. It's collecting and triaging everything everywhere all at once right now. You've seen this in your endpoint detection response tools, your EDR tools, but those are just directed at one part of the problem, may not be directed everywhere, and may not be directed at all the indicators, because some of those are going to be the misuse of normal things. Think about live off the land attacks, but also insider threats can look very similar. They go right by EDR tools. It gets into the analysis and investigation quickly. It can rapidly bubble up to a larger group of analysts before it's filtered up to the investigator in this workflow, not as a separate escalation that has to languish in somebody's queue. You can immediately intervene. Modern tooling, EDR tools shine at this. They're on every system. You can isolate your systems. You can also take network intervention steps. Those are a little bit more complicated, but how is that designed into the workflow? And then go on to your post-incident activities, come to a conclusion, and then assess the conclusion. This is the critical part. This is where you need the human judgment to say, is the obvious thing going on our dashboard enough? Or does it fully explain it? Does it provide a likely cause? Does it provide a sufficient cause where all the things we know are wrong are now in there? And does our hunt reveal anything that makes us want to look at this broader? Or is it ready to go and we can put a conclusion on it? What I found generally is that the big incidents spend time in this anyway. So they go through the internal process and then they call in help, which is good. Like that's why you want an outside IR team, and that's the type of teams I've led mostly. And by the time you get there, you know it's going to be a serious incident, but you've already gone through this process at least once and you're looping through. If you've got automated tools that do the collection and do the analysis, and they're building that record and they're maintaining it, you can get your external teams or your surge capabilities on that a lot more quickly, bring them in up to speed and let them jump in right there without necessarily giving up all the internal access.
Another huge advantage to that, Kall, is the ability to do it remotely, because many times we've had to physically get hands on a machine in order to collect the data that we needed to investigate the incident. The ability to do it remotely and grab that data and analyze it takes hours off of the entire process.
Oh, absolutely. And think, you've seen this with your EDR tools, right? You know that you can let people log into your console remotely because most of them are cloud-based now. But do you have the full access that you need to resolve the root cause of the incident? Can you investigate the likely things? Can you quickly eliminate the things? In a disrupted environment where you've got containment and eradication going on, you may find whole segments of the network offline. You may find the domain controllers taken offline so people can't authenticate in, and you need these kind of external accesses. Do you have that with your complete suite, or are capabilities unavailable to the investigators? And that's an important thing to think about there. We've run into that a number of times. All right, so I wanted to do a summary slide here of what we've been talking about. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say something, Bob.
Nope, I'm good.
We collect and process evidence, right? We've got a good automated tool, takes that down to minutes. Does that tool give you the expansive capabilities you need? Do you have a complex environment with more than one operating system? Do you have a hybrid architecture? Are you partially cloud, partially on-prem? And we used to think everything was moving toward the cloud, was never coming back, and now we're seeing a lot of clients moving key functions back. And then, is the evidence collected to a quality and to a depth that you need to perform those functions? Are you looking at all the different outcomes that you're trying to resolve to, or are you bound to the idea that this is always going to be an external attack? And can you find things internally, even with an external attack, where they've completely achieved employee level access, maybe coming in through the VPN with a stolen identity, and in doing all those things that look like an insider but are in fact an outsider? What do you do if they're not logging in from China or North Korea or Russia, right? Throw those out, or Bulgaria. And then, how do you identify those without certain investigative capabilities that just aren't present on your EDR tools? So you need a suite of tools available to your process. Can you do it fast enough to make a difference? Right? Can you get the IOCs fast and do the basic frontline analysis of them? Can you go in and feed those back into a hunt? Can you clear them as definitely a bad indicator, or certainly one worth investigating wherever it goes? Are you prioritizing your findings with threat intelligence? Do you have a system that can integrate into your threat intelligence and automate those searches? If your investigators depend on a particular method, like the MITRE framework, right? Your hunters probably use it, your pen testers probably use it. Do your DFIR teams use it? And are they able to model the attack in terms that are comfortable to them, or do they have to translate from tool to tool, depending on it? And we're going on to the next card there. Can we scale the hunt? Can we actually use real-time hunting during an incident? And my argument is very soundly yes, but do your tools enable that? Are they going out and looking for new indicators, or are you just able to search across old ones in a limited context? It's very rare in my experience that people have a full asset inventory and that they have access to it during an incident. So, do you know what's out there? Are there actually entire environments out there that may be just not thought of anymore? Dev environments that are pushed off to the side because they haven't been used, but still may have integrations. We've seen things like that in incidents. And finally, the ability to go out and get data into one spot where you can look at it, sort through it, and share between investigators. And I'm just going to stop there, because sharing information is huge across the enterprise, but just can you enable your analysts and your investigators, and then that fact checking by your managers, those roles that we set up for this purpose, do they have a common repository, a common place where they can go look at it and not get tunnel vision based on the data that they had access to and that they analyzed? All that will help you come to conclusions faster, and probably more sound conclusions. And do they have that strategic methodology and that investigative flow that we talked about earlier these are all some key considerations that can go into you deciding how to organize this. With that, Bob, would you have an example of what this might look like in real life?
Certainly. Thanks, Kall. Now, to put much of what Kall has just addressed in context, I want to share with you Binalyze Air, and in particular, the Investigation Hub. As you see here, we have a dashboard, and we see dashboards in various technologies, but what we have in this is a composite of the results of the artifact collection and analysis to give the analysts, even the L1, L2 analysts, specific details as to the threats identified and potentially the root cause of the cyber incident right away. In preparation for this webinar, you can see that I collected over 1.7 million artifacts from 89 artifact categories in an acquisition profile, and from 10 separate assets or endpoints in an environment running everything from Windows, Linux, and Mac OS in a single task. So not only did I perform the collections on those, I also did the analysis leveraging our drone analyzers, as well as the MITRE framework analyzers. And in the course of that collection and analysis, you'll see the results in this dashboard that the MITRE analyzers identified 13 tactics, 50 techniques, across 5.3 thousand findings. What's more important in this is you can see that it also identified the top assets, that these assets that had the high level threats on them. These are all hyperlinked. I can isolate these machines very quickly right now in looking at this and prevent them from being leveraged as a platform to further the exploitation of my environment. But more importantly, this collection and analysis was performed across these 10 assets simultaneously in less than 20 minutes. So the idea that now we've broken this down from literally what would have been hours, and as you heard from my background, I had run teams that were responsible for going on site, performing the collections of this data, then processing it, then performing the analysis. All of those were time-consuming tasks that we're now able to do remotely because we don't have to put hands on the machine anymore. We can do this remotely. We can perform the collection. We can do the analysis in a single task, look at the results, and know exactly what machines are our high risk or our high priority machines to remediate. So we can isolate them, remediate the threat, and be able to put them back into operation with the knowledge that they have been remediated from the risks that they posed. One of the things that I wanted to show you then was this is cyclical. So not only do I see the results in these 10, but those MITRE attack analyzers might tell me something like I see lateral movement of the intruder within my environment. So if one of these machines was used for that lateral movement, I could then very quickly enable my quick start items to be able to perform additional tasks. Now, those additional tasks might include acquiring additional evidence from other machines that were identified in that lateral movement, or simply triage, proactively threat hunt in my entire environment for any other risks or threats that might have expanded beyond these 10 machines that were initially identified. Additionally, you notice that I have the option to do an interact that literally allows me to interact with other machines in the environment, or I could interact with these 5 machines simultaneously when they're isolated, go into them, remediate the threats, and be able to unisolate them, put them back into production. But I can do it all remotely, and I can do it very, very quickly. Some of the other things we talk about is the average speed of a cyber incident investigation. We have been able to demonstrate that we can reduce the cyber incident response by 50 to 75% with Binalyze Air, and provide that contextualized forensic level visibility that I had shown you some of in the dashboard previously. But we can validate those alerts. some of the things that you need to keep in mind here in looking at this is, as you see the value in this investigation hub, you're now elevating the skill sets of your L1, L2 analysts and making them more valuable, because now they're able to make informed decisions on the data they're finding, because they have the data, they have the results of the analysis right in front of them, and they have intelligent information to be able to elevate to the next level, the L2, the L1, the investigator, or even the SOC manager. So you can see we can identify those that are false positives or noise, so to speak, or the real threats. We can also perform those evidence acquisitions and the initial analysis, as I said, in under 15 minutes. Those 10 machines that I had done across 89 artifact categories was less than 20 minutes for all simultaneously. We can also accelerate that acquisition by a factor of 10. We are literally able to pull that data in, and we can also triage those machines, one or multiple, in less than an hour to proactively threat hunt for other threats in the environment. Another critical piece of the tool is the timelining capability. And we just did an exercise this morning with my colleague Craig. We were able to not only pull the data from the findings in to this timeline automatically, so we can automatically see the sequence of events. We can also enrich the timeline with data from other sources. For example, we did a practice with a Wazoo server that we had set up, initiated a trigger, automated the collection and analysis, and then simultaneously we pulled the logs from that Wazoo server and added them into the investigation hub, which then populated the timeline, and we were able to see the Wazoo server logs in the timeline, as well as the sequence of events of the collection of the compromise of the event that was triggered. So incorporating all of this source data into a single view and into the investigation hub is critical to make those informed decisions about the event, identify the cause of the event, and now confirm that it is the root cause, not a secondary or tertiary cause. It's the root cause that needs to be addressed and remediated, as well as any other ancillary effects of that event, so they can all be remediated across all the machines in a very fast period of time. Additionally, the visualization in this timeline does allow you to see the incidents leading up to the event, as well as what occurred after the event, and it can give you a roadmap for the actions that need to be taken, as well as any other investigative steps that need to be taken to prevent it in the future and ensure that you have identified and eliminated any advanced persistent threats in the environment. This gives you, again, a good visualization of that workflow. Here we're seeing we have the capability to collaborate in a single view. Having done this work and having worked with teams and run teams that did this, we often saw it was siloed. I would have to assign an image to a consultant, have them go through it, find the data, and then when everybody finished their assignments, we would have to bring them together to essentially get an assessment of the correlation, how things link together. We no longer have to do that. With Binalyze Air, they can collaborate in the same environment on the same investigation to see all of the results and put those results together, as well as understand what's already been flagged or the scored verdicts of the risk events. So we can see not only the high risk events, we can also see things like matched. If we have keywords or that type of thing that we're going to look for on a common, in a standard investigation, we can always find those and see where they exist. For instance, data related to information that should be in secure environments is found in unsecured environments or user machines. We know where that is immediately, and we're able to remove it from that. So the ability to do this collaboratively, have visibility into those machines and the activity on those machines, as well as automate all of these processes, makes all of our people much more efficient in their tasks and elevates their capability. So you can see the automated process that triggers with an alert, for instance, from a perimeter detection tool, like the Wazoo example I gave you. It triggers the event. It automatically begins the collection in Binalyze Air, which in turn begins the analysis of those artifacts as they're collected. We can also identify the opportunities to contain machines or isolate them in the environment without having to power them off, remediate the threat, ensure that the threat has been mitigated, and put that machine back into production. But also, we have the ability to generate the report from that investigation hub as you had seen it. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, we can do this across all of the major platforms, including cloud environments. So we see that workflow again. We detect the event, it triggers, or the alert or trigger then kicks off the collection and analysis. We analyze those anomalies. We start to see the results and identify the root cause very quickly, because now we know what the scores are, we know where the threat occurred, we know what patient 0 is, as well as anything else that may have been connected to it or subject of lateral movement from patient 0 elsewhere in the environment. So we know all of those steps. We now know we can determine the solution, because once we know what root cause is, it's much easier to eliminate the threat. We know what it was, we eliminate it, we implement that solution, we then rescan the environment for additional threats or any advanced persistent threat related to that incident, and then we can begin the process all over again. Now, one thing I like to say is when people tell me, well, this could eliminate some of my headcount, that's not the goal of this. Actually, the goal is to make your headcount more efficient, because they are now freed up from time-consuming processes of collecting the images manually, processing all the data. I like to refer to it as over-processing, because you only need specific pieces of information related to the event as opposed to processing an entire disk image, and then finding the root cause or elevating it to an L2, L1 analyst or the investigator or whomever. We're able to now make those L1, L2 analysts much more efficient, because they can now take the time that they would have previously spent on those manual tasks and be proactively scanning the environment using our proactive threat hunting capability and a combination of the MITRE attack analyzers, as well as your preferred Yara, Sigma, or OS query rules to identify any other threats or anomalies in the environment. So you're beginning to make them more efficient and more productive, because they are proactively policing your environment and ensuring that it is safe from threats and prevent any further compromise or threats in the environment. Again, we look at the automated investigation and response use cases are both proactive, as I had discussed in that proactive threat hunting, using things like our triage capability, where you can scan the entire environment. We can also do automated compromise assessments. Again, proactive. Are there any threats in the environment that we haven't identified yet that might have slipped through? And whether those are externally generated or internally generated, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we can still identify those potential compromise assessments. It can also be used in a reactive use case, where we have rapid incident response, because we know the alert took place. It's very easy to deploy that responder, pull those artifacts into the console, identify the threats through our analysis between the MITRE attack analyzers and our drone analyzers, as well as any keywords that you may search for, and know what the threats are, as well as the score, the ranking of the verdict on those threats. So you know the high priority threats that can be addressed immediately. And if there are a large number of threats, The collaborative capability allows you to assign them to different analysts simultaneously, so everyone's working productively to remediate the overall threat. Additionally, it allows you to automate a lot of the SOC operations because we're integrated with all the major EDR, SIM, and SOAR, and we're not only able to take the alerts from these products, these solutions, but we're also able to incorporate the logs from those into our investigation hub and our timeline to get a more holistic view of the event. The end goal of this, not only do we remediate the threat, but it's a learning opportunity. We're able to understand how the bad actors perform the tasks, so we can now change our method of prevention to incorporate these new processes or these new tasks, these new techniques that they're using to prevent them in the future. So again, we're learning from this as well as building on the capabilities to protect our environment proactively. So in summary, root cause is the goal of every cyber incident. While it's potentially costly in human resources and time, we can do it much more efficiently because, as we've shown you and as Kall showed you in the comparison of the timelines, we can do it in hours as opposed to days. So we're able to ensure that the threat is mitigated, any advanced persistent threats are eliminated, and the environment is rendered safe before we unisolate those machines and put them back into use in the environment, in the network. Automated investigation and response is the most efficient way to determine root causes of cyber incidents, and we can do it very, very quickly, in a matter of hours, if not minutes, because we have the capabilities incorporated into the Binalyze Air. We dramatically reduce the cyber incident closure time and the human resources and staff, enabling them to then transition to proactive threat hunting to prevent other compromises or other cyber incidents. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Sophie for questions if we have any, and we'll provide the answers to the best of our ability.
All right. There is one question in the chat, Bob. How will I know when I have identified the root cause of a cyber incident?
Kall, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Yeah, part of what we talked about was the quality of that conclusion, and I think it's a good way to close this. What Bob was saying too, it's not just faster, it's better. And if the methodology is there to let you recognize it, is it just likely root cause? Did we run out of resources? Did we run out of time or data? Is it a sufficient cause, meaning that everything that we've seen is going to, is that going to be what we call root cause? Or will it be that we've determined the initial cause, we've determined the attack path, and we've moved on? We always want to get to the highest quality answer, but it's not always possible. The better the tools, the better the process, the more likely it is. So how will you know when you've gotten there? I would say sufficient cause is the goal. When you can explain everything that you've seen and you've taken reasonable steps to check all around and make sure there's nothing else going on with your proactive hunts and some of the more high-skilled activities you can engage in, I would say that's root cause. And when you report it up, are you supporting the actual root cause, which may be technology debt or business practices or business necessity that may never change? But if you're not alerting the executives that they need to at least consider it now, should we actually get rid of that system that controls the core of our business or upgrade it? The answer is probably going to be no, but can we get rid of a peripheral system that seems to have a lot of vulnerabilities? It gives them a chance. So sorry, Bob, you were going to say something?
No problem. Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you. The details of the investigation results will reveal the root cause. As we go through all of this, we start to see that we're going to focus in on patient zero, the machine that was the root cause, and then the events, the compromise, the threat on that machine. So we'll be able to get there very quickly. Now, with that, I will caveat it and say those results have to be validated with proactive threat hunting and continual monitoring. But you can I would say you can generally rest assured that the details that point you to patient zero, the events around that, and that's where the timeline really comes in very important, because the event will have an idea, a pretty good idea of the time frame of the event. So that gets us down to the time frame, the event, the machine, and now we can start to see exactly what the root cause was, and we can be comfortable and confident that we not only have identified it, we've remediated it.
Great, thank you. And I guess we're pretty much at time, but any final words from either of you on why identifying root cause is so important?
Yeah. We make a lot of decisions. So I don't just lead the technical teams, but I also interact with the executive teams. And so many of the times, my job is to go in there and say, we have eliminated certain horrible things. What we do in data breach review is we look at the data on the systems that are compromised. If we have root cause from our technical teams and we can definitively say, these are the systems involved, this is what happened on them, I can remove tens of thousands of dollars of cost around protecting data that wasn't implicated in the event. Outside counsel is usually driving some of those decisions or participating with it. So when we report to counsel, based on a good, solid finding of root cause, we believe these are the systems implicated. We've performed a limited analysis on this, and we find that the data at risk is exactly this. This is everything that was on the system. Now, based on the root cause, we didn't see it exfiltrated in a meaningful way because they're, whatever system is implicated, we can just start shaving off cautionary, proactive, and expensive tasks. We can get back into business faster when we have a good understanding of it. And all of that, the true value of root cause is, what does it let the business do? I've had some incidents where the systems were destroyed. They were all encrypted. There was really nothing to work with. And we had to go in and analyze the data that was on all the systems and see what is the risk. And counsel decided to proactively notify hundreds of people that may or may not have been implicated just because the investigation didn't turn up the details. All that was wiped out by a ransomware event. So the better, quicker, the cheaper.
And candidly, the CISO, the board, the CTO, the CEO, they're all going to want to know, how did this happen? What was the root cause? You need to be able to provide those answers. Or in the case of a services company, the customer is going to want to know. So you need to be able to conclusively report to them the root cause and the steps you took to remediate it.
And you're probably dealing with, if you've been the victim of an incident like this, you're probably dealing with your partner's third-party risk management processes. When is it safe for your business partners to contact you back and get your systems realigned to provide whatever good or service that you do with them? It depends on the industry, but having a good, solid root cause analysis, a definitive statement of the risk, a definitive statement of what happened, will let your partners bring you back into a trusted relationship faster, and that can be invaluable to the business. It's not about reputation anymore. It's about your ability to proceed as a business. Frankly, is anybody surprised when anyone gets breached anymore? It's just not that big a deal, but your partners will lock you out to keep themselves safe until you can prove otherwise, and RCA will get you a big part of that.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kall, for joining us, and Robert, for your time. It was great to hear from you today. I think we will stop it there. I hope everyone enjoyed the session with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
Bye-bye.
Bye.